Hello, welcome to Portal's Portfolio series, where we will have readings and interviews with student writers and published authors from Vancouver Island University and around the country. We'll talk with them about what it takes to be a writer in the ever-changing world of publishing. Portal 2021 is currently being designed by Chantal Calitz, and all 104 gorgeous color pages will be shipped off to the printer on March 24th. It'll be on newsstands in late May. Stay tuned for information about our 30th anniversary virtual launch to be live streamed on Facebook in mid-April. It'll feature contributor readings and merch such as new t-shirts, mugs, and book bags to mark 3 decades of publishing in the heart of Vancouver Island. Hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to have Rose McQuirter with me today on the Portfolio series. Rose is a 5th-year student at Vancouver Island University, where she is an English major with a minor in creative writing. Rose's short fiction is becoming a standard in Portal magazine. This is now the 4th year in a row that her works have been selected for the magazine. And last year, in the 2020 issue, Rose's story titled Bump and Strike won the Portal Portent contest. Rose was also published in the 2016 edition of the anthology In Our Own Voice. This year, Rose's short story, Birds of a Feather, is being published in Portal 2021. And today, Rose McQuirter joins me from her home in Nanaimo. Rose, thank you so much for being on the Portfolio series.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been published in Portal the last 4 years. Your writing is so strong and it just gets selected every single time. What's your secret?
I don't really have any secret. I think I was supposed to mention this later, but I definitely write for myself. I'm not always thinking about the audience, so it always comes out very naturally.
Well, it definitely resonates with the students. Like the Portal selection process is anonymous, so nobody knows whose pieces it is, and yours gets selected every time, so they just must be really strong. What first attracted you to writing? What makes you want to write creatively?
I think, I've always made up stories in my head. I've always been a very visual and emotional person. So even as a child, I was always like, I would have a book and I would just be making up the stories to the pictures, even though it already had a story, right? But I wasn't really attracted to writing until high school. And I wrote a little bit, like I was kind of like journaling a little bit about myself and about the things I experienced. But again, I felt like I was writing for other people and for an audience. And until I kind of decided, there was a particular English teacher and maybe some particular pieces I read where I figured out that, I shouldn't be writing for an audience. I should be mostly writing for myself. And just letting it flow, not thinking about any external sources. And so that's when I really felt like, okay, this is what I want to do. It's just very freeing for me. Yeah.
Do you find it like an exploration of yourself, what you're going through at the time and figuring out your own feelings?
Yeah, I definitely do. Again, I was going to mention this later, but with Bump and Strike, I didn't really know where it came from until later. But when I was thinking about it, reading over it, like at the time, I was really thinking about, I was having a little bit of health issues at the time, and I was thinking about like my mobility and how much I was afraid to lose that. And I think that comes through a little bit just because there's I talk a lot about losing limbs and like, not being able to move in that particular piece. So yeah, I do think even if I don't know it, in a lot of the pieces, there's something that I am working through myself, even though that character isn't necessarily myself.
Nice. Since you wanted to start writing at an early age, what was it about VIU that drew you in?
Honestly, VIU, it was just a natural choice because I'm originally from Comox. So it wasn't a very far move for me. And also it seemed like a really small community that I could get to know rather than going to somewhere like UBC or UVic where there's these massive classes. And I think that was a really good decision for me because I really got to know the people in the creative writing program and the English program. And I got to know my professors as well. So I think it was the right choice for me. And yeah.
So you like the small, more intimate workshopping
Yeah.
and nice. Who are some of your favorite authors? Who are the authors that you try to emulate or that have inspired you in your writing?
A big one is probably Flannery O'Connor.
Mm.
I just like there's something really a little bit dark, but also very realistic about her stories that I find attractive, and I kind of really want to reach that with my writing as well. I also really like Margaret Atwood and Stephen King, but I'm kind of leaning away from horror at this point. I just kind of want to like my stories that I still want them to be like a little bit unsettling, but I'm less trying to make them unsettling. I'm just kind of letting it flow, right?
Yeah, I can see that. I was just reading your story, No Castles, in the 2019 portal, and that one's very horror-ish,
Yeah.
or but I could see each year it gets less and less. So, do you have your stories? You seem to know which stories would work for Portal. Do you have a bunch that you choose and you just try and choose the best one, or do you choose one that you know will suit Portal, or
I usually just choose the ones that I think are the strongest, and those are my most recent pieces, like Bump and Strike. I wrote not last year, but the year before, and Birds of a Feather I wrote last year. So I don't know. I kind of know what other people are going to be attracted to and like.
Nice. Rose, could you read from Birds of a Feather?
Yes, something rattles the window pane. Keat lies in bed and squeezes her eyes shut, convincing herself it's the winter wind, the savage gusts that shake the rotten frames all the time, but she knows it's a bird. The rattling stops. Keat lowers her duvet and peeks into the gray room, breathing dust. A strange country hum drapes itself on the sills and the doorways and Pete's side of the bed. She can hear branches across the road crack beneath snow, the shivering worms in the black stiff earth, and the journalists in the city writing things about her. Lady Keat quits concerts, her baffling New Year's resolution. Keat folds back the blanket and approaches the window, pulling the curtain aside. Pete's car is still gone. He backed out the previous night, his brown sedan shrinking like a hungry rodent into the night. She swore she'd heard wheels turning in the snow-packed driveway this morning, but the spot is bare. She looks for the man she saw crouched near the road yesterday, the stranger who crept out of the ditch after dark. He had a beak, she'd told Pete, who pretended not to hear her and continued packing. She shuts the curtains. In front of the mirror, Keat releases her hair. Even after rinsing with apple cider vinegar, the strands stink like coins, dirty pennies caked in lint. Pete likes it, the smell of money. He made sure to dump coins on the bedside table so the smell of metal, hitting hundreds of palms and eventually falling into his, wafted up his nose as he slept. Keat opens her mouth. Her throat feels scratchy, but her tongue is still there, pinched between her chipped front teeth. She starts to cough. Downstairs, she swallows some cold coffee from the pot. When she stops choking, the quiet pushes in. Pete said the house in the country might inspire Keat to sing again, because it never spoke itself. He made sure to pack its radios into the trunk of his car and left the dust-caked tube TV in the cellar, unplugged, so she couldn't hear that either. Not even rodents can stand it out here, he said, as though the thick quiet would coax her back to the stage. He seemed to forget that even his mum's abandoned cottage was a symphony. The kitchen faucet tapped out a lone drip every few seconds. The fridge clucked and hummed, the mattress shrieked, the knobs clicked. Peter must have forgotten another appliance, because music muttered in the basement, coming on every day at 3 o'clock. She drifts over to the window above the kitchen sink and looks out. Fat snowflakes start to fall. The yard begins to look smothered, pinned down under the heavy weight of white. She liked it when things couldn't move, but something was moving now. Keith dumps the coffee pot in the sink and leans towards the glass. There's something behind the lattice in the yard, but she can't make it out. A shoulder, a head, maybe a wing. The shape stays crouched. She gets the feeling that it spotted her too. The same pressure she feels from an audience when she's on stage, their impatient gazes. She turns away, but her eyes catch Pete's photo of their graduation class above the dining table. Robbie Michaels glares at her from a sea of other students. Feathers gather in Keith's throat, a drag of fibers at the back of her mouth. She opens the fridge to avoid the photo and drinks from a milk carton. Afterwards, she wanders to the back of the house where there are fewer windows and less lattices. She settles on the bed in Pete's mom's room and tries not to think about the ditch man with a beak, or how Pete said he'd be back in a few hours. Keith opens the bedroom closet. She nearly spits out her milk. The rack is crowded with fur and feather coats like animals, bear, deer, raccoons, with their backs turned. She steps forward to pull out one of the coats, and her foot lands on something silky, slippery. The back half of the closet is littered with red feathers. As far as she knew, Pete's mom loved animals, and yet every sleeve feels real. Her hands feel filthy. Pete steps out and heaves the closet doors closed, but they keep popping back open, animals fighting to get out. Mom loves birds, Pete used to say. She's mad about parakeets and they don't even sing. Pete rushes to the kitchen to call him, but there are only mangled wires where the phone used to be. She remembers now. He chucked that in his trunk too. She searches the house for a second phone because her tongue is dry, and there's a flapping in her left ear that won't quit. In the upstairs bathroom, she finds a phone that resembles a blow dryer. She dials and watches herself in the mirror while it rings. At some angles, she thinks she sees stage makeup clinging to the edges of her face. "Are you ready?" Pete asks. They've barely said hello. The flapping in her ear becomes more urgent, like there's a bird downstairs crashing into walls. "Are you ready to sing, Pete? I knew you couldn't take the quiet." That TV comes on in the basement. It seems louder this time. "How are you calling me now?" Pete asks. "Mom only had one phone, and that one's in my car. Did you walk to the station? That's like 3 miles in the snow." Pete drops the phone in the sink. The blow dryer clatters against the porcelain. Downstairs, she searches for the source of the noise and confirms it's in the cellar. When she opens the basement door, she bites her tongue hard and tries not to see the glow from the far end, the muted light that moves. She changes her mind. She will sing again. Maybe the voice and the money aren't her own. Maybe the birds will smack her hotel windows. Maybe the dirty money will never wash out of her hair. She and Pete will brave a tour, and even if the man with the beak tracks her on the street, she will go on. As Keith reaches to shut the door, 2 flat hands press on her back, and she goes flying down the stairs with her tongue between her teeth.
Thank you. That your stories have such a strong theme or motif of animals, like forest mammals, or in Bump and Strike it's fish. There's that one line: "The rack is crowded with fur and feather coats like animals, bear, deer, raccoons." And it reminded me when I was reading through your 2019 piece, No Castle, there's a line that even the kids are wearing, or there's the people in the kook zoo, and they're
Yeah.
listed as raccoons, deer, lions, and you have that list. What is it about like forest animals and that inspires you so much?
I think because in my stories, there's always that element of fear, and I think the fear comes from like in that we are similar to animals, like we separate ourselves, but there's that still that like, I don't know, primal kind of fear, like survival type mindset that still goes on, and I think that's what is coming out there.
There's also a theme of a voice, like the feathers getting caught in the throat, or like the voice being weighted down by winter or something. Is that something that also strikes you as kind of an interweaving of that primalness plus the, a loss of voice or having your voice dampened in some way?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah, I don't know. I was definitely just thinking about like, what if the voice you had was not your own? Um, I think mostly I was thinking about guilt, and that's the same with bump and strike too, is that there's kind of this looming guilt where it's just in every part of their lives and they can't really get over it, even though, everybody else is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that really comes through as well, you mentioned about mobility issues at the beginning, and there's also a lot of your stories have a strong element of the body, like they start in the body, and things are it's an animal theme, but related viscerally to the body.
Yeah.
What does a typical writing day look like for Rose McQuirter? When you wake up and you go to your writing, what do you do?
I mean, I don't have a particular writing process. Like if I'm on a schedule and I need to write, usually I will read a little bit before I go, kind of what gets I kind of have this little voice in my head, this little writer voice that goes on, and that's kind of what gets it going. But usually I'll be out and about doing stuff, like in class or outside doing something, and I'll have this thought, like I'll have a line, and then I'll know, oh yeah, I should write this down. And so the next time I have a pad and paper, then I'll write it down and kind of think about if it's going to be something, and if it is, then I make it a priority.
So do you write a lot in spurts, or less of a daily practice and more of like kind of in chunks?
Yes, it's definitely in spurts.
Okay.
Try to have a daily practice, but the inspiration isn't always there, and the voice isn't always there. But there's very like specific times where it seems to be flows freely. I've noticed if I write are very smooth, like the writing voice is just constant, but before then it's kind of like all over the place.
Do you write in a notebook or straight into your computer?
Well, like if I hear a line in my head, then I'll write it down, and then kind of maybe plan out what is going to happen. But I ideally like to write, like type on my computer, and I think it's something about seeing the font. I don't know what it is, but I like to see the writing in formal font.
Yeah, more of a visual process.
Yeah.
What is your revision process like? Do you write it all out and then work through revising, or are you constantly going back and revising?
I mean, usually I write the story, and then when I go back, I'll just think, like, usually there'll be one or two discrepancies that I already know about that will be identified, and I have to go back and fix those. And usually it will make the story a lot stronger once I go back and think about how it's going to work. And it might even change the story substantially, but again, it's still even stronger once, you know, I go back and think about it.
You, as a fifth-year student, you must have been through quite a few workshop courses. Do you find that affects your writing quite a bit, like going back through and using all that feedback?
Oh yeah, yeah, I really appreciate the workshops. I really like the feedback that is like mixed. I always like when they say, "Oh, I really liked this, but," they'll have a but, and I'll always be excited about that, because then I know that they've actually like read my story, really thought about it, and how it can be successful. Because you know, I can't see from another person's point of view, and I know that my stories don't always make sense. So I really want them to be able to, you know, make sense and be comprehensive. So I really appreciate those workshops. And I also appreciate reading other people's work and being able to give feedback.
Yeah, I love getting stuff to workshop. Every week you get like 5 stories and you have absolutely no idea where they're going to come from.
Yeah,
Just all
exactly.
different things. It's really fun. Where do you like to write?
I don't have any particular place I like to write. Usually at the dining table, but ideally, like in my apartment, the dining table faces a window that looks out, and I can see trees and stuff. So it's in the sky, and it's nice to be able to see that while I write, because then I can really think about. A lot of my stories are very within the environment, so that I think it kind of helps to be able to see natural elements and, you know, be able to imagine what it's like to touch them, the smell, all of those kind of things, the five sense things. Yeah.
Usually when I'm looking to, I'll take a break in the afternoon and I'll go for like a quick hike or a walk. And then usually when I come back, I have so many ideas, I have to like sit down and write them all out. Do you go for walks, or is there some routine that you do that really gets your brain moving?
Uh, Yeah, I mean, I think night walks do that for me, especially at the Nanaimo waterfront. I think, you know, the lights on the water are always really inspiring. Um, Walks are good though, because then it you know, immerses you in the season. Uh, and seasons are always very inspiring for me. Um, I always like the railroad tracks too in Nanaimo, following those. 'Cause then you get to see like the trees bare and then, you know, blooming, and then yeah.
Nice. Rose, would you be able to read from Bump and Strike?
Yes. It was your first boyfriend, right? Mick asked from his beach chair. His skin is rosy in the Hawaiian sun, and his cheeks, chin, and belly are caked in sunblock. Noel realizes the only thing he managed to maintain is his teeth. His cutting grin is as ivory as the day he proposed. Yeah, Noel nods. Her tongue twists the name before she thinks it. Jonathan. Ah, right. Nick's smile flickers in the tropical sun. He pats her leg and returns to flipping through Motor Trend. Noelle hadn't considered the lie for a long time. It grew out of her like a leg or an arm. It was always there. When she graduated from college, at her job interview for editor-in-chief of One Woman, and when she met Mick. She'd bat her wet lashes and say how the sea looked that day. People would spot her gaping anguish and think, poor Noelle, first love feasted on by a great white. Poor Noelle, what a story. She was treading water. Telling the truth would be an amputation. You know I loved you when you told me. Mick glances up from reading with an easy, bleached smile. not for the story, but for the way you described it. She'd told him they found Jonathan's swim trunks, torn, brown, bloody, and washed up. Mick led her out of the bar and down the street to Dairy Queen, where he ordered her a blizzard and asked if he could see her again. Genuine, Mick adds. Everyone seemed to think so. The people who signed Noelle's paycheck, and that woman who found them a house at Point Grey. Noelle was honest. Noelle lost love to a shark. Should we go for a dip? Mick tosses his magazine aside. He's already looked at all the pictures. Noelle shades her eyes and looks hard at the water. It flickers and winks, but she sees long shadows in the dark, dark blue. She could lose a leg or an arm. She won't risk it. Noelle shakes her head. Suit yourself, Mick says. He waddles down to the water and wades in. It's not long before it's his shoulders and the rest of him is swallowed. Noelle, Mick gestures to her. It gets deep, fast. He smiles and his face goes under.
Thank you. Were you surprised when you won the contest last year?
I was a little, but I kind of had a feeling because it did so well in the workshop. Yeah.
You knew it was strong right from the get-go?
Yeah.
Nice. How much do you submit to contests and other magazines?
I would like to submit more. Portal is a pretty convenient one for me, so I can just, send it off. But I'm planning to submit more once I graduate, maybe create a schedule for myself. And then the other hope is to maybe create a collection and hopefully publish that within a year or two.
Nice.
But yeah.
Have you got a lot of rejections? How do you handle rejections when you submit to a magazine and you get a letter back?
I mean, I don't really mind rejection. I remember in my first year, I had a really bad workshop on one of my stories, and that kind of just after that, I was like, wow, I survived that.
Oh.
So now I feel like I can survive anything, right? I have a tough skin.
What do you mean by bad workshop? I have a hard time picturing that.
Just some pretty critical feedback, you could say. A lot of people didn't like the story.
Oh.
But again, like it was kind of essential because then I was like, okay, like what do I need to do to improve? And also I survived that workshop. So it's like I can do anything now.
I found in first year fiction, I made a lot of real obvious rookie mistakes.
Yeah.
That ever since then, like it was so obvious afterwards. I was like, how could I have made that mistake? And then now I never make those mistakes again because it was so obvious the first time.
Yeah.
Like the first thing I learned, like no one knew who my narrator was. Like they're like, where's the story coming from? One of my first stories, it just made no sense. And
yeah.
Then afterwards, I'm like, of course, why? How could they not? You have to get to know the narrator.
Yeah.
How could I do that?
I mean, I think it was because I was kind of experimenting with poetry and prose, and it became more poetry than it became a story. So people were pretty confused. And I was like, okay, maybe I should, if I'm going to write it as a story, I need to dial back the poetry part a little bit. But it also made like those little hints of poetry made it stronger. So
I was going to ask you if you wrote a lot of poetry because your work as fiction has such strong imagery that I could see that for poetry that would be very handy to be able to do that.
Yeah. I write a little bit of poetry, not as much as I used to. Yeah, I guess I would have to put myself on a schedule. Like the only time I really wrote poetry was when I was in courses that required it. And I did really enjoy it, but I don't hold myself accountable, right? So.
Nice. Well, I'm aware of your time here, and you've given me plenty of time with your readings and questions. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for watching the Portal Portfolio Series. Portal is a literary magazine published by students at Vancouver Island University's Creative Writing and Journalism Department on the territories of the Snuneymuxw, Quw'utsun, and Tla'amin First Nations. For more information about Portal's portfolio series, please visit portalmagazine.ca.